Hello, this is Teresa Beem, and this is my husband, Arthur. And this is Adventist Talk, where we talk about all things Adventist. Well, we thought we would take off one of the shows and talk to my husband, Arthur Beem. So this is going to be an interview of him because he comes from a very different Seventh-day Adventist background than I do. All right. The first thing is Arthur, my sweet love.
Yes.
Who I've been married to since 1984, who has given me 3 wonderful children, who have then given me 3 wonderful grandchildren. So, how are you this evening?
I am so blessed and so honored to be able to come and just talk with people. That's why it's Adventist Talk. I grew up Adventist, so I'm
Okay. Well, why don't you tell
about
us
ready.
about that?
Yeah. So, just to help people, just to inform people where our backgrounds come from, and I think it's important because we've already had people ask us, well, what in the world are you talking for? You're not an Adventist. Well, okay. From when I was born till I graduated from one of the universities, the South Adventist universities, I was steeped.
Just tell them where. Southwestern Adventist College in Keene, Texas.
Right.
We're naming names.
Well, I hadn't gotten there yet.
Oh, I'm so
So from the very beginning, it started out in, let's see, it would have been Moses Lake, Washington. Went to first grade there. Well, I should say started first grade there. Then we moved over into it was Gresham, Oregon.
These are Adventist
And
schools.
yes, Portland Adventist Academy. I went there. And then we moved to Washington State, where I went to grade school up to 8th grade there. And then we moved to Texas. So there's a movie which says, it was Michael Scott, I think, said, what gives you the right? Well, I'll tell you what gives me the right to talk. One, I have a heart for Adventism and Adventists. I've been in it since I was little. My family was extremely orthodox. We had every one of the Ellen White books. We read Ellen White every day.
You did the morning watch.
We did the morning, we did the morning watch every day. We did the Friday night sundown ceremony, if you will. And then basically from sundown Friday night till sundown Saturday night, we had the big, huge speakers that were like huge speakers, almost like an end table, that I would lay down as a little kid and turn on Aunt Dan and Uncle Dan and Aunt Sue and listen to them continuously. And
I know your family listened to Delker. I remember that.
Well, my mom and dad listened to Delker.
Yeah. That was a famous.
I wanted to listen to the groovy King's Herald.
Oh, that's right.
And then if we really stretched it, it would have been
the Heritage Singers.
The Heretic Swingers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that was there. My sister, by the way.
But I couldn't listen to them very much because obviously only the calm songs were good enough for that. But okay, so from a very young child, obviously we were didn't drink, didn't smoke, couldn't swim on Saturday, couldn't go out to eat on Saturday, couldn't go to stores on Saturday, couldn't buy gas on Saturday.
Did you take your shower?
We were pressured heavily to take it. Now we could take it after sundown on Friday night,
but it's not on
not on Saturday.
Okay.
So
did you get your clothes all ironed?
Absolutely, everything was ready.
Very into that.
Yes, absolutely ready.
Yeah.
So my father started out as a teacher. He was a Seventh-day Adventist teacher. Then he got his master's and became the educational superintendent over Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana for years. And so my upbringing was absolutely as Seventh-day Adventist as you can get.
Okay, well then let's go back to that because were you vegetarian?
we were vegetarians. We were probably the first ones in the country. If anybody remembers TVP, they were like these little brown rocks that came in like a milk jug, and you would pour them into like some kind of a bowl and then soak it overnight to get it reconstituted soft. And it was kind of like a hamburger
You just put
type
eggs with
stuff.
it.
Well,
Were you allowed eggs?
we had eggs, and we were lacto ovo most of the time. Well, kind of back and forth. We went through the whole era of eating casseroles for breakfast. Do you remember that
Yeah,
whole
oh
era?
yeah. Our family went through that.
But anything that came through the Adventist church about health topics,
Mhm.
we were the first ones there. Um,
Your
so
mother
yes, we
made
were definitely. Oh yeah, she made her own gluten. It was really gross looking. It looked like something from Mars. It was this gray glop that was it. But even as a kid, I remember just craving meaty type things, even though I'd never had meat.
Did y'all eat fish?
Very little, but periodically, when my grandfather, who was Norwegian, would come over, we could have fish.
Okay, so the drinks. I know you were only allowed certain
So
drinks.
we didn't have soda except for on Saturday nights. Every once in a while, not all the time, we would go by the A&W root beer store, which they had their stores. I don't know, they may still now. I don't see them where we live, but we would get a gallon of A&W root beer and could have root beer on Saturday night. But that was it. You couldn't have it any other day of the week,
Yeah.
so.
Okay, so what would your dad or mom have done if they found you sneaking Coke or Dr. Pepper?
It wasn't available to sneak. I don't even remember where it was. I couldn't have snuck it anyway.
But you had to have had something of caffeine that they
Oh,
would
no, no, no. I never had caffeine till I was,
no, but something you could. What would your parents have done if you'd snuck if they caught you?
well, they
Oh,
would have told me, no, we don't drink that. We don't do that. But it was never in the house to drink.
yeah, so you wouldn't have gotten in trouble.
I mean, well, they would have told me not to do it,
Okay,
that we didn't believe in that,
okay,
is what they would say.
okay. Well, say so when you did watch TV, you were allowed to watch television at home, right?
Um, some TV. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So I was just curious as how strict they were with the television.
Mostly they were strict with it.
Okay,
Mostly we played outside.
yeah,
Just played outside. It was probably the last generation where you actually went and played outside, just kickball and
yeah,
baseball and
yeah.
riding your bike.
And nobody watched you.
And
You were not
nobody watched. I was
you were not supervised. You just ran
unsupervised.
around the
Yeah.
neighborhood unsupervised. Yeah,
One of the old, if you cut it, rub dirt in it. If you,
that's right.
if you fall and didn't break something, then just
Yeah.
shake it off, that kind of thing. So what's important to me to get
Mhm.
across is I understand what the real Adventism is
Yeah.
that was laid out in the 28 fundamental beliefs,
Yeah.
which back then was 27 or less.
Yeah.
Um, absolutely. And we went by them
So it was
wholeheartedly.
around the 1960s, right? That you're talking about, maybe a little early 1970s.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All
Yeah,
right.
that's right.
So, okay, what in a general sense, how would,
Well, just a second.
okay.
And one thing I wanted to point out is I hear, not literally, but I imagine that there are people out there saying, well, that's the old Adventism. And
Mhm.
no, I would have to disagree with you. It's the same Adventism, but the younger Adventists today just disregard it and say they're Adventists, but don't
Yeah.
go by the tenets of the
Right.
Adventist church.
Yeah.
That's the difference, is we went by them. And most, I can't tell you how many friends of mine and family members that anytime we have any discussions, not even arguments, just discussions, we'll say things from Adventism that I grew up in. We'll say, oh no, we don't believe that anymore. But it's still in the 20, eight
Yeah.
fundamental beliefs, and
Yeah.
it's still preached from the pulpit.
Yeah.
So you have this real split between, I don't want to say young Adventism, just nouveau Adventism in what actually is Adventism.
Yeah. A lot of people are just basically, it's my truth, my Adventism.
Yeah, and I don't understand that, but anyway, yeah, so that was my upbringing. And so through high school, I went to Adventist boarding school down in the Rio Grande Valley, um, and was there for 3 years, graduated from there, and then went to Southwestern Adventist University
That's in Keene, Texas.
in Keene, Texas, and I graduated with my BSN there. So I've been a travel nurse ever since, and we've traveled all over. So we've gotten a very good view of at least the North American Adventist churches.
Yeah.
And they can differ from coast to coast. We used to live in California, Oregon, Washington, Texas. We've lived in Florida, North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, gone to all across the nation. And they tend to be basically the same. It's just you have those that are Adventists in name only.
Yeah. And I think because you were brought up a PK slash TK or teacher's kid,
Yeah, yeah,
and they moved you around a lot. So you really got to know Seventh Adventism,
yeah.
all of it,
So
at least the United
so
States, North America.
just for the audience, I understand Adventism and I understand the established Adventism, the 28 fundamental beliefs, and I understand that there are those that don't go by those things,
Mhm.
but they still exist. They're still preached from the pulpit, and they still say that is what Adventism is.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so give us some ideas of some good memories you have as an Adventist. I know you've been into music and sports your whole life, so
Those two things were probably my premier things, even though, back then, now, high schools and colleges get to play against each other and in, collegiate sports and things like that. And that was
mhm.
actually goes against the Adventist church because Ellen White absolutely
Yeah.
said, no, you can't do that.
But you're just meaning that now they do.
Now
But
they
back then
do.
they
Right.
we
And I
didn't.
was huge. I was good at pretty much all sports, but the ones that I really loved were tennis. Loved tennis. Very good at tennis. Um, I was a really good uh, freestyle slash downhill skier in the Northwest. Um, I was very good at football and soccer. Lettered, if you can letter, back
Well,
then,
I think they did have it at
kind of,
Valley Grande Academy. They did
right.
give you
Of
some
course, you
kind of
didn't get to
honors.
play anybody else but the people in the school,
Yeah.
but I loved it. I was good at it, and I wanted so badly to become a professional downhill skier and go to the Olympics. But that obviously doesn't work
Mhm.
in Adventism. It
And
might now, but it didn't then.
and every kid wants to do that, but it's frustrating because in an Adventist school, you don't even get to pursue it to find out if you can
Yeah.
even make the team.
But let me tell you, you said good memories. I had two teachers. One was the music teacher, and one was the PE teacher in Washington State. One was Larry Bullock. He put a love of music in me that just has stayed my whole life. He was a trumpet player, and he got me started to play the trumpet at third or fourth grade. But the way he had band, it wasn't band, it was orchestra, and he taught us the strict orchestral etiquette, how to play, what to do, what not to do, how to sit still. You could work your way up in degrees from third chair to first chair if you practiced and were good, which I got to first chair finally, and absolutely loved it. Just really, really loved it. It was a foundational thing for me was music. I just
Yeah.
loved music. And then the other one was PE. Um, the I'm trying to remember the teacher's name. It was Gene Romer. Gene Romer was the PE teacher for Mount Lake Terrace. and then it went from Mount Lake Terrace. And my dad, he was the principal there at the time. He bought another school because I we outgrew Mount Lake Terrace, and we moved to. I'm trying to remember the name of it. I'll see if I can remember the name of it. But um, he made PE as real and fun and intense as possible. Because little boys, they want it intense. They don't want some frivolous, stupid football. They want to tackle. They want to. Now we couldn't play tackle, but we played pretty rough flag football. But he went by strict football rules. And it was a blast. We made teams and we had seasons. We had football season, basketball season, baseball. It was really, really fun. And he was an amazing gymnast. And so the PE program would put on a tumbling team, which I was good enough to be on the tumbling team. And
Which is interesting because you're tall. You were like,
well, I
what are you,
was a lot of
6'3"?
times, yeah, I was the base. And so I had a partner, he was shorter, he was probably 5'8" and a lot smaller. And so we had a
Hmm.
a team, and it was fun. It was very good. And those are two probably my best memories of uh, grade school, and high school was that. I would even say grade school. High school was kind of. It's not that our PE teacher wasn't good. He was excellent. Our PE teacher in high school was Monroe Solomon. He was fantastic. He is an amazing athlete, and he was intense too. So I just had two of the best teachers in PE, and not to mention he taught history, and he made it super interesting. So yeah, I really liked Monroe Solomon. He was fantastic. That was high
Well,
school.
good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we need to say there are many wonderful things about being raised Seventh-day Adventist. I mean, some of the best people in the world are, which are my relatives
Yeah.
and some of my
And my
friends
relatives, yeah.
that are, oh yeah, of course. I'm so sorry. All our relatives. And okay, so you got married, you had kids, and then see, so let's get into what happened to your faith from the time you were a kid to,
Okay.
when
So
their kids were.
this is interesting, and I want you to listen to this because this is important, really important. But it's true because if there are people out there that are on the edges, they've either left and they're not Adventist anymore, or they're
Mhm.
thinking about leaving Adventism. I have a lot of heart for that because it's difficult. It's hard because you lose your culture. And so for me, the spiritual side of Adventism was tough because from a very young child, I did not connect. All our books were obviously Ellen White.
Yeah.
They had the pictures of Ellen holding this 40-pound book for 45 minutes. The story that, especially back then, that was like this believed story.
Yeah, there were a lot of miracles that were attested to her
Right.
that turned out to be just myth. But
Not, yeah. And as a kid, I would ask questions about it, about her, and about the things that she would say. I'm like, why we're in Bible class? Why are we talking about Ellen White? And I could never get any answers. And it was just, I was a very, I I had questions as a child.
yeah.
And they were serious questions. And I would ask my father, well, why don't we dance? Well, we just don't do that. That was the whole explanation. And then when I got older, it went from we just don't do that to, well, there are older and wiser people out
Hmm.
there that have
Yeah.
made these decisions. And that's it. That's it. And interestingly enough, I never ever got any really better answers. And so from grade school to middle school, same thing over. And I just got to a point where it just didn't mean a lot. It was just a class I had to take to get through
Yeah.
because it didn't mean anything. You
Right.
never got any answers for anything. Saying, in other words, you have an answer, but if you had if you had a question about their answer,
Hmm.
it wasn't ever answered.
Yeah.
And if you had some really good questions, even as kids, little kids can come up with some pretty good questions of, well, why do we believe that? Why did she believe that? Why is she in the clear word in the margin
Mhm.
saying something differently than the Bible says? And then we say, well, it's in the Bible. It's not in the Bible,
Yeah.
you know? And so there was this cognitive dissonance that was set up for me early, and it just stuck there, and I didn't want it there. It was irritating to me
Mhm.
to constantly have these questions never be answered, but they acted like it was this like quiet, solemn, uh holy thing,
Yeah.
to talk about Ellen White and what Ellen White said. And then it went from talking about Ellen White to Sister White. Well, Sister White. And then as it came into the 70s and 80s, they started to say, well, my favorite author.
Yeah, I remember that.
And it I look back at it now, and I'm just, wow. It's like they wanted it appeared to me. I don't know if this is true or not, but I'm telling you, I still got no answers.
Mhm.
But they seemed to back out, like I don't know if they were ashamed of Ellen White
Mhm.
or didn't want to be challenged on Ellen. I didn't know then.
Yeah.
I just knew things were changing,
Yeah.
but they weren't changing what was taught from the pulpit
Right.
or what they were teaching in school. They were just kind of, not to be funny, but whitewashing
Mhm.
over. As you came up through the grades, they would just kind of whitewash over it. So it would look a little different,
Mhm.
maybe sound like when they changed the name of Steps to Christ, or the
Yeah.
Great
Yeah.
Controversy, or
Yeah.
making this new and interesting name that,
Modernize it.
yeah, to modernize it. I'm like, what did you do that for? If she's so important, why did you do that?
Right.
So my spiritual life, young, began to just go neutral. I mean, neutral. I don't know if that's the right way to
Well,
put it.
let me throw something in
Yeah.
here because, okay. So it was interesting because my family was super liberal. And I wanted to marry somebody that was not as liberal. I wanted to go more towards faithful Adventism, the orthodox. So I saw his family and I thought, oh, wow, he's going to be super orthodox. We're going to get married and all this stuff. So when we got married, the last time that he was in an Adventist church was on our wedding day. Now that's an
More or
exaggeration.
less, but yeah.
From the day we got married, you completely said freedom. I'm a grown man. I don't
Well,
have
and,
to
and I
ever go to church again.
and I want to say this about that. That's a true statement. I'm not saying the statement's not true.
Yeah,
I wanted to tell you what was going on up here
yeah,
when that happened was I didn't even really realize it happened. It just got to a point where everything was the same. No answers were given.
right.
And now I was old enough to actually have good questions
Yeah,
that were still not being answered.
yeah,
And I just felt absolutely empty.
yeah,
It felt like going to church was less than not going to church. So to me, I just stopped going to church.
yeah.
Probably, I guess I had started college,
Yeah.
you know, we were married.
Oh yeah, we started
So
college. We were a
84,
couple.
85, something like that.
Yeah,
And we were at Keene going to SWAU, and it was SAC at the time.
yeah.
And here's to add to my history. The radio station at SWAU was started by my grandparents. And their pictures up there, and in the radio. So I mean, we were steeped, just
Mhm.
just to uh reiterate how Adventist I was. I was as
Mhm.
Adventist as you could get without being the conference president,
You're right.
or a pastor, right?
Yeah.
So my spiritual experience, what was the term I came up with? I was
A practical
I was a
agnostic.
practical agnostic.
Yeah.
I didn't hate God. I didn't hate Adventism. I didn't hate Adventists. There was no hate in me. I got tired of not getting answers, and I didn't see any point.
Yeah. And you just didn't care.
And I just I just didn't care. It
Well, but it
didn't.
was interesting because those years when we were married, and I was going to
We're
church.
still married. You said, well, those years when we were married.
Well, as opposed to when we were dating. So
Yeah.
when we were married and we had
Yeah.
children, he wanted the children to go to Sabbath school and church.
I thought there was
But
some intrinsic value to it, but I
yeah,
didn't know what it was.
yeah. But you never went.
I wanted to be a good father, and I thought, well, wouldn't a good father want their kids to go to church?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Which logically is stupid because
yeah.
it's like, I'm not going to go. Why would I insist that they go? So
So when
I wasn't very logical then,
so when like when we were in Keene, we were married and we
but I
were
was
living in.
beginning to be logical.
Yeah, yeah, I think you've always been logical.
Not then, though. That wasn't very
Okay.
logical.
Well, anyway, so we were in Keene, and was it the terrible? Do you think it was like the terrible pastors there? Was it boring? Like what?
No, let me tell you about Keene. We had some of the best speakers in the country for the Adventist Church. We
Mhm.
had Ron Halverson Jr., we had Ron Halverson Sr., we had Morris Venden.
Yeah, that's right.
He basically launched the whole righteousness by faith
Hmm.
right in front of our face. I remember the first Saturday he had the righteousness by faith sermon, and
Most of it
it
is.
was a big stir, and then he ended up getting sent to California. It's like all those people get sent to
Mm,
California, right?
yeah.
um
I just remember he had a voice like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh.
yes.
Righteousness by faith.
That's but let me tell you something. There's something about his message though
Yeah.
that and this is true. Morris Venden spoke about Christ.
Yeah.
Morris Venden spoke about relationship with Christ
Mhm.
and the love of Christ. And the funny thing is, my whole upbringing, the focus, I honestly cannot tell you ever hearing about Christ.
Mhm.
They spoke of Christ as an entity, but remember the Adventist Church hasn't always been Trinitarian. I don't know if they're Trinitarian now in a strict sense, but back then there were a lot of people that were not Trinitarians. And so we had Morris Venden come through, and that was a big thing. And that actually did make an impression on me. I liked a lot of what he said. I mean, it didn't really change. It didn't start coming to church regularly, but I didn't not want to hear him. But I wouldn't like go out of my way to hear him. But it was better than everybody else. He
Yeah.
he was great. So
So evidently you must have gone to church occasionally because you remember this.
occasionally,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
occasionally.
yeah. So I was exaggerative, but I don't
No,
remember
but I
you
mean,
one time. I don't remember
in
you one time.
essence,
Yeah.
yeah, in
So
essence,
anyway.
yeah. So this is the one, oh, another good thing
Uh-huh.
that we did. There was a particular Sabbath school class that we had, and what was my verbiage? It was a, it was an, they were outliers, not as in lying, but they were outliers. They
You
were
said out loud, lawers.
I would say, yeah, outlawers, outlaw and outliers. They were a group of intellectuals that would meet in the very back of the church.
On
And
Sabbath morning.
and let me tell you, they were crazed maniacs because they would bring donuts.
They
Well, no, we eventually picked it up.
no, we were the
Was
ones
it
that
the
decided.
were we?
Yes, because I was constantly being in trouble
Yeah,
because we brought donuts
we
and
brought
coffee.
real coffee into the church and donuts, and everybody loved our whole class. We just had a great time because we actually could actually started. This is where it started for me. Was there
Mhm.
was that class? People asked hard questions,
Yeah, that's
and
right.
the other people listened
Mhm.
and were willing to agree or disagree or talk about theology
Mhm.
in a manner I'd never encountered
Well,
before.
people were open. The
Yes,
bishops were in charge, but before the
that's
bishops,
right.
I mean, there was a time the McAdams were in charge of it.
That's right. I
But
think
you,
that was his original class. Was McAdams was the
Right.
presidents of SWU for a while.
So you could slip in the back door and slip out before
Yep.
church.
Yep. That's right. And not have
And you
to
didn't go over.
encounter, you
Yeah,
know,
that's right. Because you didn't feel like you were actually in church because it
that's
would.
right.
So anyway,
That's right. So I loved, well, that's strong. I enjoyed that class
yeah.
because of the intellectual stimulation
Mhm.
of being able to actually talk about Christ
Or just anything.
or
You
anything
could
in the
you were
theological
not
realm
bullied
of
into
Adventism.
silence.
And if it was, and it's not we were against Adventism at that moment, it's that we had deep questions
Oh
about
yeah,
Adventism, and
that's right.
nobody would point at the other one and say, you are a heretic,
Right.
you are deceived,
Mhm.
you're a bad person for thinking that. It's like, oh, that's an interesting question. Let's talk about that. Then you might talk about it for the whole entire time.
I remember, just one of our pastors, I was always involved in church. I was always on committees and doing Sabbath school. I mean, very involved. And I remember one of the committees we had, the pastor was sitting in a chair and he was kind of leaning back and doing this. And I said, the truth is nobody's ever, the fourth commandment doesn't tell you have to go to church on the Sabbath. It just says you have to rest. And when I said that, he went, he was just like, what did you what did you say? And so in that Sabbath school, you could have said something like that,
Yeah.
but yeah, the pastor did totally freaked out. But go on, I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah. So during this time, now I had read earlier in my life Sherlock Holmes. I got the complete works of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
Mhm.
Um, I was pretty young when I got it, and I liked it because it said Arthur on it. And then
Aw.
yeah, and I didn't realize what it was, so I started to read it, and I was just fascinated. And it took me years to figure this out, that was one of the main things that took me out of Adventism.
Yeah, he has persistently and consistently said this since we've gotten married, or since at
And
least
yeah,
that he loved Arthur Conan Doyle and that it made
yeah.
him
And
question
I knew it was
everything.
just a story. I get it.
Mhm.
I get it. But here's the thing about Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes was ridiculed for a lot of time because they say, well, Scotland Yard has looked at it and there's nothing there. Just you can give it to Sherlock Holmes because there's nothing there. We're not interested in it. And they would just pass it off. And so what Sherlock Holmes would come and do, he would go through every nuance of the whole entire scene of the crime.
Mhm.
And if anybody's read him, there's one even where all there was cigarette ash. And so he picks it up very carefully and takes it home. And he goes and buys like a whole bunch of different cigarettes and he burns them all to see what the ash looks like. And then he matches the ash up to whatever cigarette it was
Mm.
and finds out it's some specialty Turkish blend, something. And then he tracks the guy down and with just the ash of a cigarette. And it didn't dawn on me. And I started to think about this as a kid. It's like I was fascinated by him because he was willing to look into things and honestly say things. He would look at something and say, no, that's wrong. And everybody else says, well, no, it's not wrong. And he says, well, okay, let's look into it. And he would listen to what they're saying, but then he would continue to look in and study into the thing that he knew was wrong that they were saying. And that's a very simplistic way of stating all of this. But Sherlock Holmes would research and look into things like I didn't know people could do that.
Mhm.
That sounds stupid, but I mean, in reality, my whole focus through all of grade school, all the way up, is you're given things to remember
Mhm.
and not necessarily given things to believe. It's like here's the 2300-day prophecy. Remember that.
Yeah. Mhm.
But
That's right.
it doesn't add up to me. It doesn't. That's your premise is wrong. I had all these questions and nobody would answer. Nobody could answer them. And so when I got to Sherlock Holmes, that's why I fell in love with Sherlock Holmes. So spiritually, it's funny, but Sherlock Holmes helped me come to the Lord in just become just hungry for
So,
knowing more about.
so I've never actually even thought of this. So you don't consider yourself having known the Lord until later, like after you went through your agnosticism?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's
Well,
I didn't know that.
remember, we didn't talk about Christ.
Hmm. Yeah.
Throughout my whole entire school, Christ's name was used as a ancillary name. Yes, it was important. Yes, he was there, but that wasn't the
Hmm.
focus of all the education.
That's
The
interesting.
education was not about Christ. Now,
Okay.
they would refute that and say, "Oh yeah, his name's there, his name's here." Okay, but there's a way to have someone's name in something, but not necessarily have it the focus of what you're
Right.
teaching.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
that was my entire
Yes. Hmm. It was
education
all
all the
about
way through SWAU and Key.
prophecy and the
Yes.
Ten Commandments.
Yeah. Daniel
Those
and
were the focus.
Revelation, the health message, and eschatology of any kind.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
and then when I really started to get into it at this point, when I started going to that Sabbath school class, I read C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity, and that was a huge hook for me. Now, she didn't get much out of it, but because of my background and because of my love of Sherlock Holmes and how he thinks and looks for the answers,
Well,
when I
okay.
hit C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity, it was like, it was this explosion. And so I just read all his books and I started reading G.K. Chesterton and all his books. And it's like these guys were openly talking about the Lord, openly talking about Christ, openly talking about how Christ affects their lives and how their lives are changed because of the love of the Lord. And just, it just blew my mind. What were you going to
I
say?
was thinking we also read A.W. Tozer,
Hosier
and
was
then
a
there was this
huge
other
one.
guy that we read, and I'm trying to remember his name. He was like a Chinese, or he was
Yes,
a missionary Chinese. Very big name. I
I'll
cannot
remember it.
remember. Okay,
Watchman Nee.
Watchman Nee. Yeah, we Watchman.
Yes, Watchman Nee.
So okay, but I want to go back to you just said I didn't get much out of C.S.
Yeah.
Lewis. Okay, I thought it was good to prove God. I thought that mere Christianity is very good at proving God, but I don't think it even came close to proving Christianity to be true. In other words, he didn't. He was mainly just doing a general
Right.
sense
What
of.
I meant was you were way ahead of me. You were way ahead
Oh,
of me as far as Christianity
oh,
and belief in God, in theology. At the time, you were way ahead of me. So to you, it wasn't as big of a event as it was
right.
for me. It was an event for me.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah.
And I remember that. It was pretty, but I will tell you, I thought until this moment, I thought that you had loved the Lord as a kid and that
I
Adventism kind of
love
threw you
I
out.
let me put it this way. This is me. I love the concept of God always.
Okay.
I always loved the concept of God. I had no, but there was nothing in my Adventist upbringing that connected me to
Oh,
God.
okay, I got you.
I
Okay.
didn't feel connected to God.
Okay.
He was a
Okay. So
an almighty dude up there that we talk about in a kind of a secondary way.
C.S. Lewis connected you to God.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
And Tolkien also,
Hmm.
but G.K. Chesterton. Yeah.
Yeah.
They connected. They made a connection for me,
Okay.
a theological and philosophical connection, but also had theological and philosophical arguments that made sense.
Hmm.
They were logical about what they said.
Yeah.
They could go draw lines between lines of thought. Never happened for me in Adventism
Hmm.
because you always had to jump over the premises were always wrong because you always had to go to Ellen White and say, well, will you believe this is in the Bible? Well, no, it's extrapolated from the Bible through Ellen White.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's a big difference.
Yeah.
And so if you have a problem with Ellen White, which I did, a huge problem with Ellen White, then the you it makes the Bible fall then, you know.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Well, then, okay, now you found the Lord in material outside of Adventism.
right.
What happened? What then pushed, how did that push you forward at that point?
Well, what happened was when this happened, the actual final big connection for me was between my wife and I. We started to read, and we read the Bible together, talked about the Bible intensely for hours upon hours, and we talk about theology, and we would we would just spend a long time together, which just increased our marriage, it increased our family, and we finally got to a point where we said, you know what, let's do this. We didn't know what to do. We just knew things weren't exactly like they were, like we had thought.
Mhm.
And so we started to have this a Friday night. uh it wasn't really a Bible study, it was more of a theological study where we would have the kids' friends over, and we would have some other people over. So, and we would have cheese and French bread and olive oil with herbs in it, and it was just really fun, really nice. And then we would sit and talk for hours and hours about theology, things that were never answered for us. And it was just phenomenal. It just fed me.
Mhm.
This fed me, and it all started through Teresa. I'm telling you,
That's very sweet.
that's a fact. And so the this went on for some time, and we got to a point where we're like, you know what? I don't remember the exact day, but we just said, we can't do this anymore. I think one was the one of the big things was the abortion issue.
Mhm.
The abortion issue was huge. I didn't know anything about abortion. It was never spoke of. I didn't even know what it was. Teresa explained it to me when I was an adult, and she became and started the first Seventh-day Adventist anti-abortion group. And you talk about going uphill.
Mhm.
It was we. It's like we became enemy number one, and we were shocked to death. It was unbelievable, the viciousness that came out of people when they found out that we were pro-life.
It was
And
really weird. I can tell you it's because they thought that if the church took up for the pro-life movement, that it would cause the Sunday law, and then the Adventists would be persecuted. And so, they could be personally not, they could be, okay, this is what they say. Our family's not going to have an abortion, but we would never tell anybody to do that because we can't legislate morality, or that's going to bring in the Sunday law.
which is the most illogical statement in the history of the world. But anyway, so the abortion issue became not just an abortion issue, but the lack of response and the ascetic attack response we got from the clergy, from everybody in the
It
church.
was really weird.
And what's so strange is, all Adventists are like this. They say, "Oh, we're not pro-choice." The Adventist Church is absolutely pro-choice. Now, they just released in 2019 a new statement. Now, remember, these are just words, because understand, the number one abortionist in the entire nation,
History of the world,
the
I
hit,
think.
yeah, is Dr. Allred,
Edward
who
Allred.
Edward Allred, and he is one of the premier promoters of La Sierra University.
He graduated from Loma Linda too, and so.
gave hundreds of thousands of dollars of abortion money to the church.
Mhm.
And they have his name on the plaque at La Sierra still to this day.
He
As
helped fund a business, um,
yeah,
a business
he
school at,
yeah, he brags about how he had performed 250,000 abortions.
personally.
Well, here's the thing. So 2019, the General Conference changed the verbiage. So you have this real flowery verbiage, and but it comes down to these big holes that you could drive a truck through that say, but the
We,
one
we
what's the
believe in it.
verbiage?
We believe you shouldn't have an abortion except for
The mental health
the life and health of the mother.
of the mother.
Mhm.
So basically, if the mother says, I'm stressed, abortion. If I'm depressed, you can have abortion. Anything that goes to the mental health now of the mother. Well, so
Well,
what?
we know when that caveat is given that people, once you open up, the
Yeah,
little tiny bit, we can't prove any of this to be true, but we just know that's normal. That when you open up one little caveat where you can, that it will be
right.
thrown open and
And
abortion on demand will
and the
continue.
problem I had was Adventists all want to say they're pro-life. And what they did is now they funnel through the hospital. The hospital may not do it. Maybe Loma Linda won't do it, but they will recommend where they can go to do it. And so they funnel this to these clinics outside so they can feign like they don't have responsibility for it, but they do. And
Yeah.
so that was anyway, that was a huge issue to us. And so we got to a point where we said we can't do this anymore. We cannot be Adventists. So uh, we wrote a letter and had them. We requested our names to be off the books of Adventism. It was a formal letter of resignation. Well, they ignored it. How long did they ignore it? It was
At
like,
least a year or two.
yeah, and we had to go back and demand you need to get, and we finally got off of it. But from that, we started to go and visit other denominations. Well, the first one it was called Friday Night Live. It was a Baptist uh, a youth pastor that was in Burleson that had this really great youth group at night on Friday nights. And they'd come in there and they would have like coffee and donuts and some other little things. The youth pastor was excellent. He was very good with youth. And he spoke of the love of the Lord and he spoke of Christ always. That was his whole focus. His
Mhm.
whole ministry was about uh, ministering to these kids, which it wasn't all kids,
Oh
but
yeah, there were
that was the focus. It was youth. They called it a youth group, but it really was more like a, I don't know.
plenty of people there our
There
age.
really was. That started it. And so we started to visit churches around the Dallas Fort Worth area. And that was about the time we left and started to do travel nursing. And we went to New Bern, North Carolina, where our visiting churches exploded. So I think we went to every church
Yeah.
in the town. Now, understand when I say visit churches, we're taking the Sherlock Holmes thing with us. We go in, we don't just visit the church, we go to church there. And then what we do is we sit down with the pastor and ask them about their beliefs. What is a Lutheran? What is a Baptist? What is an Assemblies of God? What do you believe? What are the core beliefs? Are you pro-life? And things like that. So we made it a real study and a real search, like a Sherlock Holmes search. And
We got to know the people. I mean, we
yeah,
didn't just go once. I mean,
right.
we'd go week after week after week as long until we just said, okay, this is not for us. And then, we'd
That's
usually
right.
make the assessment
That's right.
fairly quickly. Within, 4 or 5 visits, we could go.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, and this is still on the spiritual journey. So the spiritual journey goes, we visit all these churches. And we finally hit one called Temple Baptist. And Pastor Steve Cobb love him to this day. The guy's phenomenal. He passed away several years ago. But Steve Cobb was a mixture between, say, Sherlock Holmes and Thomas Aquinas, and he was a studier. He was Dr. Steve Cobb. And this man didn't stop with his PhD. He took it into each sermon. This thing, I mean, he studied like I've never seen anybody study and research. And we would sit down with him for hours
Yeah.
and talk about, okay, so what do you believe? Why do you believe this? Where do you find it in the Bible? Uh, Show us, teach us. We want to know.
Mm-hmm.
And he was absolutely amazing, absolutely amazing. He is such an amazing personality that uh, Teresa ended up. He was a kind of the model
The protagonist.
protagonist for
Do I have it here?
a trilogy series that she wrote called Mission Vatican, and you can get it on Amazon.com. Go get all three books. But
Let's
but
see.
this is
Uh,
this is
that's the first one.
this is the first one right here.
Second and third one.
And it's exciting, it's theological, and they're very smart books. They are very it's I don't want to compare it to the Da Vinci Code, but it has kind of an exciting feel. It's a theological feel, but it also has a philosophical. It's just fantastic. They're very well written. You need to get them. So Steve Cobb absolutely was by far the best uh, preaching we ever heard. There nobody even compared to him. And it was just such a shame that he passed away.
I do think Peter Kraft, but I mean, he's not a
But he's
pastor,
not a
though.
pastor.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's stop there with our story. And if you guys have any more questions about why we went into Catholicism from there, we have a free, well, we tried to make it free. Amazon will charge 99 cents for you to download it. It's an ebook called The Kingdom, How God Led Us from Protestantism into the Catholic Truth. And so if anybody wants to hear the rest of the story,
It's on Amazon as well.
yeah. And so, yeah. So at this
And
point,
if you forget the name, just look it up under Teresa Beem without an H.
okay. And so now you're an ICU nurse and we're traveling around and pretty much I think that's going to be the end of our biography. But here, just why are you involved in a YouTube ministry for Adventists?
Fantastic. Well, I can tell you this. When we left Adventism, there were no resources, there were no answers. There was nothing but condemnation, and basically friends and family just fled by the bucket loads. And so what we wanted to do is Teresa's book that she wrote, It's Okay Not to Be a Seventh-day Adventist. Um, she wrote that as a resource for people that were ex-Adventist or thinking about being ex-Adventist or Adventists that actually were willing to ask hard questions and not just say, you're deceived, you're demonic, which is most of the responses that you get from most Adventists because they're scared. They're scared of asking hard questions because Adventists have a difficult time answering those in a honest, direct way without having to refer to Ellen White. So for us, we want it to be a resource of love and a resource of listening. And so if you notice on the front, our intro to this says this is a no persecution zone. Well, I mean, we mean that. We know what it's like. When we came out, you talk about persecution. You think you're persecuted at Adventists. Just try being an ex-Adventist from the Adventists. It's tough. There's
That's
no,
nice though. We have not had a complete. I think once we got through it and they knew we were
I'm
coming
telling
back.
you, Keene was tough.
Yeah, a lot
Keene
of
was
times it's hard.
very, very tough. And so we wanted a ministry to be able to reach out and talk
Hmm.
and be able
Yeah.
to listen, and not just listen, but to be able to help people in their understanding of their feelings of feeling like they are lost or they are deceived or all this stuff, that when you are in search of Christ, we always
Mhm.
want to bring you to Christ. I mean,
Amen.
that's
Yeah.
what it's about for us. It's not about proselytizing anything, unless you want to consider bringing people to Christ proselytizing. Um, so that's why we are doing YouTube ministry, because you can reach out, you get to talk, people get to hear you, people get to uh, know your personality and know you're real. It's not just we don't make any money. These books, you don't make any money. It costs you. I can tell you, it has cost me a whole lot more money to put them out than we've ever gotten from it. So it has nothing to do with that. You can do 50 books and still not make any money. So
Okay, so how has Christianity been for you outside of Adventism?
Christianity for me, outside of Adventism, has been amazing because it was very accepting of questions, very accepting of theological differences. Um, Almost all of the denominations we went to were fine with questions. We're fine with very hard
Yeah.
questions because we didn't softball these questions. Don't think we went in there and say, "Do you love the Lord?" We didn't do that. We went in there and said, "Why in the world do you whatever the topic was? Why do you do that? Why is that? Where is it in the Bible? What, you know?"
You know what? I remember
We
one
held their
question.
feet to the fire in a very loving way.
Yeah, I remember one of our questions we asked, and we asked this to every single one, is, the Christ wanted unity of believers. It says it in Ephesians and all over the Bible. When the last prayer that God had was for the unity of his believers. And every single one of the denominations out there said the same thing. Uh, we can all be unified in some kind of spirit. It was not a good answer. I didn't. The Lord said one faith, one baptism.
One God.
Right. And so we lobbed some really good questions at him, and most of them were not used to. I mean, to their credit, they weren't. I mean, they weren't. It wasn't like they were stupid. It's just they hadn't had people ask questions like this. If we think so much, we believe in God and we want to keep His commandments, but one of His biggest commandments was to stay unified. And so they said, well, Saint Augustine says, charity. Let's see, unity and essentials. Uh, uh, Charity and non-essentials, but the problem is who gets to decide the essentials. Every single denomination would take a different
Mhm,
a
mhm.
different set of
Yep, that's right.
essentials.
That's right. That's right. So Christianity outside of Adventism has been very accepting, very loving, very willing to talk.
Yeah, it's not scary.
It's not scary. They're Most of them are very accepting of the questions, and um, are willing to sit down and talk. And if you disagree, that's okay.
Hmm.
It's okay to disagree. And they're even willing to say some things they think are wrong,
Hmm.
where I never found that in Adventism, ever.
Right.
So that's what it's like
Yeah.
uh, outside of Adventism.
Okay, so Arthur, I'm going to ask a
Yes,
theological question.
theological question.
Okay, so what did we learn? I know one of your big things that you've learned since leaving Adventism
Uh-huh.
is the new covenant. So I want you just to talk about
Well, I will say this. My entire upbringing, they never ever talked about the new covenant. Uh, it may have come out of their mouth, but they never ever would dare talk about the new covenant as if it was equal or greater than the Ten
that. Do you
Commandments.
think they even knew what the new covenant was?
It makes you wonder. I mean, I'm not going to accuse them of anything, but it was very suspicious to me that I look back now at the theologians and they, you know, Doug Batchelor has done a piece in the past year and a half where he talks about the new covenant. He says, oh yeah, we believe in the new covenant. It's just written on your heart.
Hmm.
But that's not that's the weakest, sorriest answer ever. Well, I mean, think about it. Who said love God and love your fellow man? Who said that? It was Christ. Christ said that. God himself said, love God and love your fellow man. Well, you would think, oh, well, you could misunderstand that and say what's written on your heart, except no. No, he continues. Christ continues. He says, no. Now, this is what it means. If you even think in
Yeah,
your heart,
that's right.
you've committed a sin. So he says, you say this, but I say,
Yeah, those are the Mount of Olives. That's what
Mount of
Jesus
Olives. And
said.
think about this. When he says I, that's the same I as the great I am.
Hmm.
He's speaking as God,
Hmm.
and he's saying, absolutely not. You people now have, think about it. The Jews had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of being at the temple, and they weren't forced to think anything. They just had to do. Now he gives, they had the Ten Commandments, just do the Ten Commandments. That's it. Just do it, whatever you do. And then it comes to Christ, and Christ says, no, but I say,
You have heard it said, but I say, yeah.
that's right. Love God and love your fellow man. People think that those are just insignificant things. And it's like, no, he's taken it up not just a step or two. He's blown the top off of it completely to where you love God and love your fellow man. If you even think of evil things about your brother,
Mhm.
you've committed a sin. If you think about stealing in your heart, you've committed a sin. Um, and it just blew the minds of the people listening. They couldn't handle it. So the new covenant, no, you can't get off by saying, "Oh well, it's just written on your heart." Yes, that's good if it's written on your heart, but unless your heart's changed, it doesn't matter if it's written on your heart. You
Mhm.
don't get off. It's not like you get a passport and they engrave your heart with love God and love your fellow man. Good, I'm good. No, no, unless you have a heart change, a soul heart change of how you think, you don't, you're not doing the new covenant. The
Mhm.
new covenant is bigger and more powerful because it turns everything into Christ.
Right.
The seventh day is Christ. And here's a little thing that everybody needs to go listen to our series we did on the story of the Sabbath. It's called The Story of the Sabbath.
It's on here. It's on this YouTube channel.
Yeah,
So
it's
just,
on this. So I strongly urge you because we've spent hundreds of hours um, putting this together,
yeah.
and it's phenomenal. And when you see Christ, Christ is our Sabbath. Christ is our rest. He says it himself, I am your rest.
So,
So the new
so
covenant to
do
me,
you keep the Sabbath, Arthur?
and absolutely I keep the Sabbath every second of every day. So it's interesting the how terminology can be used in all kinds of different ways. So keeping of the Sabbath, you will understand me saying what I do if you listen to the story of the Sabbath. It's about Christ now. And I'm not talking about the flower power love where you have the VW minivan with the flowers on the side and everybody's going around naked with long hair and
Yeah.
flowers in your hair. I'm not talking about that kind of love. I'm
So,
talking about the love of Christ, the true love God and love your fellow man.
so what does this love look like that you're talking about?
It looks like Christ. It
Sacrifice
it looks like sacrifice. It
and
looks like um
doing what's good for
you
others.
have, I can't tell you how many friends and family have said things like this. They'll say, well, that's just the way men are, right? And it could be about lusting or pornography, or it's like, wait a minute. You don't get off, it's no longer the old Jewish sacrifice of you offer up a goat or a lamb and everything's okay. Remember what Christ said.
Yeah.
It's everything. The new covenant is everything now, including what you think. So you don't get off by doing pornography or even thinking about pornography or thinking in a vile way. You don't get off with that. You have sinned and you need to ask for forgiveness. And what does he say to them? Go and sin no more.
Mhm.
You can't just keep doing it and say not I but Christ.
Yeah.
You can turn the statement of not I but Christ almost into an evil thing because you're pawning it off on Christ saying, well, I'm just a man. Well,
Mm.
no, Christ took that away with the new covenant where he said, no, no longer can you do that. No longer. You have to have a pure heart.
Yeah. That's right. Wow.
So, new covenant in a nutshell.
So I'm out of questions. Do you have anything you want to end on or?
Oh, and just for the record, I do go to church on Saturday. But then again, I go to church on Sunday and I go to church on Mondays and sometimes Wednesdays.
Mhm.
So, yes,
And why? How can you do that? Who goes to church every day, Arthur?
that's right. That's right.
Well, they don't know. You'll have to tell them.
Oh, yeah. Mass is every day, at least once a day,
Yeah.
every single
Catholics
day.
worship daily,
We
or at
have
least
we
it's
have
available for you to
we have
work.
gone to Mass for 2000 years on Saturday.
Yeah.
But no longer is it just Saturday. It's everything. It's Christ. It's
Yeah.
Christ focused,
Yeah.
not law focused,
And
because it is about Christ now.
every single day we worship our Lord and Savior, who
Amen.
has saved us from the depths of hell and brought us to his divine heart.
Right.
His divine
That's
heart.
right.
That's where he wants us near him. He loved us that
Amen.
much. Who who can speak of this and not, if you know Christ, even begin to know him, you'll know how the spectacular privilege we have of worshiping him and obeying him and
Amen.
speaking of him and living for him
Amen.
and dying for him if necessary.
Amen. So we love all of you. And this isn't live, but if you'll put questions in there, we'll answer them.
We'll try our best anyway, sure.
Yeah, even though it's not live, we will come back and look and see, and we'll try to answer any questions you have. But like I said, we've got several books on Amazon.com. Just put it under Teresa Beem, and they will all come up.
Wow, thank you so much. You've been
I
pushing
just
my books. I did
I
not
love my
expect that.
Adventist family and friends, and uh I just really
We understand.
yeah, we
We
understand.
understand what it's like.
You wanted, and this is called
We do.
Adventist talk. Well, you heard some Adventist talk. This
That's
is some Adventist.
right.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, you
Thank
ready?
you for your time, and uh, we will have the next one is going to be, well, eventually. I don't know if it's the next one, but we're gonna do her life, and it is totally fascinating, totally different than mine.
And
Absolutely.
so, how many interviewers get to kiss? Mwah.
That's right. That's right.
The man they've interviewed.
That's
Thank
right.
you, honey. I love you.
Love you too.
You guys have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Seventh-day Adventists are one of a handful of Protestant denominations that believe Christians should rest on the seventh day like ancient Israel and the Jews do today. They base this belief on the Ten Commandments. In addition, they believe the seventh-day Sabbath is the only day God set aside as a special day of worship. Adventists teach that in AD 321, the Roman Emperor Constantine issued an edict declaring Sunday as the day of Christian worship, and that the Catholic Church caved to the emperor's edict by shifting the sacred day from the seventh to the first day of the week. But did the Catholic Church really change the Sabbath day to Sunday? Is there really more to the story? We begin a new series that will be exploring the answers to those questions. We will start at the beginning from Genesis to Mount Sinai, to the life of Christ, to the Reformation, through the 17th century Sabbath wars, all the way to the end of the world. We will be telling the epic tale of this holy day. This is the story of the Sabbath.